Hi, this is Jürgen Rasmussen. Welcome to the Provocative Hypnosis blog. I thought I would give you guys one simple tip, one thing that you can do to really develop as a coach, as a therapist, as a trainer, but ultimately as a human being. I've attended a lot of seminars during my career. I really like to seek out diverse perspectives. And I developed this habit that for me just seemed like common sense. But I also discovered that this habit has been extremely useful and that virtually no one's really doing it. And that habit was that whenever someone was selected as a demo subject in seminars, I would tend to get the contact information for that person and contact the person later, either by phone or by email, and saying, hey, this is Jürgen, I met you at the seminar, you did this demo with X trainer, how did those results, what happened in real time? And to my surprise initially, I discovered that way more often than not, that what had been passed off as a huge success in the seminar had often not held up in the real world. Meaning a lot of the demos that people thought had been, mind-blowing, that had really changed someone's life or someone's issue, actually hadn't done so in real life. And I discovered that, as long as demos looked impressive, people would just assume that the results were good in real time. And even more scary, the trainers would essentially encourage this. So this began to bother me more and more throughout the years. And this is something that I would encourage you to do if you're a student, if you're attending seminars, is whenever the trainer is doing some sort of demo, if the trainer is courageous enough to do live change work on stage, get to know the demo subject, contact them later on, and make the discoveries. What were the actual changes? Did anything actually change? Has this held up in real time? This is so important to do, because unless you do that, you likely won't develop the insights and the skills to make the distinctions between demos and sessions that look good and demos and sessions that look good and actually lead to change. This is one of the key insights that you want to develop as an agent of change. But there's really nothing in the training environment in and of itself to help you to make those distinctions. So you want to develop the distinctions of being able to differentiate between a session that looks really, really good and a session that looks really, really good where there are actual changes. If you contact the people involved and you do some in-depth interviews with them, you will hone your calibration skills in terms of making those types of connections, making those types of dots. This is a bit like in the legal system. Anyone who's looked into the field of lie detection knows that police officers, psychologists, psychiatrists don't really have any more ability than average Joe on the street to assess whether someone's lying or telling the truth. These groups have a tendency to stack up at about 54%. So the only reason why many of these groups have the power that they do in our legal systems is because people erroneously think that there is something in their education that helps people make distinctions between, what's the difference between a person who, for example, might seem like an offender and a person who actually is an offender. There's nothing in psychology education or police education or psychiatry training or law school that would help anyone make those sorts of distinctions. If you were to, for example, want to train yourself to calibrate and make such a distinction, you would likely need a training environment where you could see people who, you have person A seems like an offender and person B also seems like an offender and actually is an offender. You would need an environment where you would develop predictions and then quickly get real-time feedback on those predictions, whether they are accurate or not, and then having some sort of chance to connect the dots so that you can see real patterns. Same with lie detection. A person who seems sincere and honest and actually isn't, and a person who seems sincere and honest and actually is, a person who's lying, a person who's telling the truth. If you wanted to develop skill in actually being able to make such distinctions, you would probably have to design a training environment where you encountered both, made predictions, got quick feedback on whether your predictions were true or not, or to the extent that they were true, and you would then be able to extrapolate patterns and see cues. And there is, of course, nothing in these various fields of education that provides, such a thing. You might have a person who has a lot of client experience, may even do well in that particular arena, and then based upon that, you move that person to, for example, a court system, and you ask the person to predict, will this person offend again? Will this person, continue to be abusive? Is this person a child molester, or does he just seem to be that way? Is this person lying? Is this person telling the truth? What will happen over time? You may, if you look at good therapists, they have an environment where they are calibrating shifts in state. They're calibrating whether or not a session was useful based upon immediate feedback, to the extent that they're seeking that out. But those skills will not necessarily at all translate into, for example, a context of legal system where you're being asked to make predictions of long-term reoffending, or how a person may or may not be telling the truth, because there's nothing in your clinical background or context that really provides a learning context for being able to make those type of distinctions. So to get really, really practical, if you're a trainer and you train people, I think that this is a habit that I have developed for myself. I'm going to invite you to do it for you, to do it for your students. I've been teaching international events since 2009, and I used to teach under the banner of provocative hypnosis, the title of my first book. In recent times, it's the psychological illusion model. Quite different, but one thing that has stayed the same was that I have always, in cooperation with a promoter, set up a forum for the seminar participants before and after the course, where people can get to know each other a little bit, and where everyone who I do live change work with, because I always do live change work during my seminars. That's how I make my living. I see clients professionally. I've done so for 21 years. So I do live change work at the seminars, and then on the closed forum, where only people who have attended the trainings have, access, these live demo subjects report the real-time changes or lack of them in the group over time, so that the people from the seminar can see what were the real life outcomes of this change work, and they can also see how I, as the trainer, interact with the feedback and how I actually interact with the students. So as a trainer, I highly recommend that you do this, because you'll get access to information that you otherwise wouldn't get access to. You won't be inspiring your students to just assume that demos that look good actually lead to real life change. And you're also modeling a mindset where the students learn that you actually want the transparency, you actually want the feedback. You're modeling an attitude that says that, look, real life feedback and truth is more important than the facade, is more important than the belief. That is super, super important. And of course, as a student, I mean, this can be tricky to do, but don't just assume, based upon what you're seeing on stage, that necessarily tells you much about what's going to happen in real life. Seek out these people, ask them over time. Get access to the information. No one else I've ever met, as far as I know, has been in the habit of doing this. So by developing this habit, you're enhancing your own perspective-taking abilities. You're getting access to information, valid information, that other people don't have access to, which will then allow you, hopefully, to begin to see patterns and make distinctions that other people really have no basis for making, but which you, hopefully, increasingly will then have more and more of a basis for actually making. So, a lot of trainers really emphasize certainty and confidence and, stuff like that. But there is a double-edged sword because if you emphasize that stuff too much, you will very easily be creating a learning context where students, demo subjects, very often will just shut up, meaning nothing much may have happened during a demo, but they feel a lot of pressure to kind of socially conform and tell you that it did, or the congruence level of the trainer is so high that the student kind of intuits that this person, this student, or this trainer doesn't want feedback contrary to his beliefs. And if the trainer is very congruent and kind of models that, then a lot of the students will also tend to develop that type of mindset. And that often contributes to the person asking critical questions or inquiring, or the person saying, look, I only partially shifted, or I actually didn't shift at all. Instead of that being very valuable information to utilize to learn new stuff, it becomes a ticket to being socially ostracized, where don't rock the boat may become the most important thing. So transparency and honesty. What you want to do if you want to grow as a human being, to develop as a person, is to do your best to be as honest as possible, and try to create systems for yourself that kind of forces you to be more honest than you're comfortable with. So as a trainer, one example of that can be to create a forum and to really encourage people to come forward with their feedback, with their experiences. Also the experiences that may not have been that good, or change didn't happen. Really commit to that transparency. I did something else for about 8 years that I've stopped doing. I'm not going to get into the reasons for that here, but I used to have a no change, no pay policy for about 8 years, and there's a lot of reasons for not doing this. But one thing that also contributed to was that I would actually get feedback. I would actually get feedback from my clients to a much larger degree. So anything that you can do that kind of almost forces honesty, whatever system you can set up around you that kind of encourages transparency and honesty is great. There's a really interesting consumer reporter called John Stossel in the United States, who's written 3 books around that area. And he used to start out as a Marxist, as a heavy leftist, and after decades of consumer reporting, he ended up as a libertarian supporting free markets, which is quite a shift. But one of the big things that changed for him was that he had this deeply held assumption that regulation, government regulation, is the key to protecting consumers. And what he realized over time was that government protection doesn't really that much protect consumers, doesn't really do a good job of it. It often more protects power interests. What really protects consumers is transparency, is reputation, is people's ass being on the line, so to speak. So go for transparency. Go for transparency. So I hope this has been useful. I know it is useful, but what anyone might hear is something else. But if you actually apply this, and you commit to show up with a little less BS every day, you're gonna grow as a coach, as a therapist. There's no such thing as a therapist really, but as a coach, as a therapist, as a trainer, and just as important, as a human being. So till next time.